Ukraine humanitarian crisis. After months of posturing while simultaneously denying any plans to attack, Russian President Vladimir Putin's assaults on multiple cities in Ukraine began overnight on February 24, 2022. The Center for Disaster Philanthropy's CDP response to this crisis is focused on humanitarian needs that arise, particularly among internally displaced peoples, IDPs, and refugees. We are not looking at the conflict itself except for how it affects population movement and humanitarian needs. To that end, this profile is not providing detailed updates about the status of the war as we believe that is better done by news media. On February 6, 2023, United Nations, UN, Humanitarian Chief Martin Griffiths told the UN Security Council, on the eve of this horrific one-year milestone, which comes on top of the previous 8 years of conflict, we still have much to do. I call on us all to push forward with renewed vigor to give the people of Ukraine the peace and support they need and deserve. According to the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, ACLED, during the week of April 15, 2023, Russian forces continued to target civilian infrastructure with shelling, missile attacks, and drone strikes, killing over a dozen civilians in the Chernihiv, Donetsk, Kherson, Luhansk, Mykolaiv, Sumy, and Zaporizhia regions. Additional strikes on April 28 killed 20 people in the small central Ukrainian city of Uman, prompting the acting UN humanitarian coordinator in Ukraine, Matthew Hollingworth, to condemn the wave of deadly strikes, reportedly the most intense aerial bombardment in weeks. In 2023, 17.6 million people in Ukraine require humanitarian assistance, 45% of whom are women, 23% are children and 15% are people with disabilities. Approximately 40% of Ukraine's population is now in need of humanitarian assistance and protection. The 2023 Humanitarian Response Plan, HRP, for Ukraine calls for $3.9 billion to reach 11.1 million people with food, health care, cash and other life-saving assistance. The humanitarian situation in Ukraine deteriorated drastically and rapidly in 2022. Millions of Ukrainians endured intense hostilities, which killed and injured thousands of civilians, forced millions from their homes, and destroyed livelihoods. Civilian infrastructure, including aid facilities, continues to be attacked. Some Ukrainian organizations struggle to secure much-needed financial support. Local humanitarian leaders and organizations know their community needs best, and building trust with these organizations is key. CDP's initial round of grants from its Ukraine Humanitarian Crisis Recovery Fund includes investments in Ukrainian organizations. The end of 2022 was marked by continued attacks on energy infrastructure, which resulted in an energy crisis, adding a new dimension to the already dire humanitarian crisis as the country entered winter. Human Rights Watch raised concerns about Russian attacks on the energy grid and the harm done to civilians, and Amnesty International called for Russia to end its unlawful targeted assaults on civilian infrastructure. In October 2022, a spokesperson for the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights said, "Attacks targeting civilians and objects indispensable to the survival of civilians are prohibited under international humanitarian law." On March 16, 2023, the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine said, Russian authorities have committed a wide range of violations of international human rights law and international humanitarian law in various regions of Ukraine, many of which amount to war crimes.